Welcome to Soulful Tales, where stories speak in soft tones and silence means more than words. If you're someone who finds comfort in nostalgia, in slow afternoons, and long-forgotten songs, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Tonight, we invite you into a quiet house. Inside it, dust, silence, and an old piano that hasn't sung in years. But some instruments, like some hearts, don't forget. They wait, sometimes forever. This is a story about a father, a daughter, and a melody that refused to disappear. This is the piano that waited. Before silence moved in, the house was full of sound. Emma played from the moment she was tall enough to reach the keys. At 5, she pounded on them like thunder. At 7, she discovered beauty in the pause between notes. By 12, she was composing melodies on rainy afternoons while her father made tea in the kitchen, careful not to clink the spoon too loudly. The piano wasn't expensive, just an old upright Yamaha with one chipped key and a soft pedal that stuck. But it didn't matter. To Emma, it was everything. Her father, Thomas, wasn't a musician. He couldn't read a note. But he watched her play like he was witnessing magic. He didn't understand the music, not technically, but he understood her. And somehow, that was enough. On weekends, she'd fill the room with Chopin and Debussy, notes floating through the windows and into the street. Neighbors paused in their gardens. Stray cats napped by the doorstep. Music lived in that house. It curled into the furniture, danced in the dust, made shadows on the walls. It was Emma's way of speaking and Thomas's way of listening. It ended with a single knock on the door. A letter. A decision. A moment that folded time in half. Emma was 17. Her face pale. Her hands, once eager to play, hung motionless at her sides. She said nothing. Just stood there, holding a piece of paper. Thomas watched her, waiting for explanation, but she walked past him, into her room, closed the door. That night, the piano stayed untouched, and the next night, and the one after that. Something had broken. Not the strings, but something deeper. Eventually, she stopped coming home before dark. Then she stopped coming home at all. Thomas never asked. He feared the answer. One day, there was a note on the table. "Dad, I need space. I'm sorry. Please take care of the piano." And just like that, the house lost its sound. The piano stood still, its keys gathering dust like snow. But Thomas, he kept waiting. Thomas never moved the piano. He could have. He could have sold it, or at least pushed it against the wall so it wouldn't feel like a ghost in the middle of the room. But he didn't. Every morning, he walked past it like one might pass an altar. And every evening, just before the sun dipped low, he dusted the keys. He didn't play. He never had. But he'd sit beside it sometimes, just to be near the silence it left behind. Sometimes he talked to it. "Your E key's still flat," he'd mutter softly. Or, "She always hated that G sharp. Too shrill," she said. He kept her metronome on the shelf. It hadn't ticked in years, but he liked the weight of it, like time, heavy and precise and unforgiving. Once a week, he opened the piano bench and looked at her old sheet music. They smelled of paper and dust and lavender. Emma used to spritz her wrists with lavender water before playing. She said it calmed her. He could still smell it sometimes faintly, in the folds of the music pages. One day he took out her favorite score, Clair de Lune. He unfolded it gently, smoothing the creases, and placed it on the stand. It stayed there, for days, then weeks, then months. A silent invitation. He wrote her letters. Dozens of them. Some started with "Dearest Emma," others just with "Hey." Some were long and rambling, filled with stories about his day, the birds in the garden, the strange new neighbor, the way the light hit the curtains at 4 p.m. Others were just one sentence. "Are you okay?" Or "The piano misses you." Or "I miss you." He never sent them. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know where. He'd heard from someone that she'd moved to the city, that she was working at a cafe, maybe teaching piano again, but he didn't dare look too hard. What if she didn't want to be found? So he folded each letter and placed it inside the piano bench, a slow archive of longing. He imagined her finding them someday, opening the lid, sifting through yellowed paper, hearing his voice in the words. It was foolish hope, but some days hope was all he had. So he wrote, and waited, and dusted the keys. She was 8 when she moved in, a blur of energy and tangled hair. Her name was Lily. She'd wave at Thomas every afternoon as he watered the roses. Sometimes she'd ask questions. Why do you always wear brown? Do you have a cat? Can I come in? At first, he kept his distance. He wasn't used to questions anymore, but she was persistent in the way only children can be. One rainy afternoon, she knocked on his door and asked, "Is that a piano?" He nodded. "Can I see it?" He hesitated, then opened the door. She stood in the living room, dripping wet, eyes wide. "Do you play it?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "Why not?" He smiled sadly. "Because the person who played it isn't here anymore." She looked at the sheet music on the stand. "Can you teach me?" Thomas shook his head. "I don't know how." She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "That's okay, I'll learn it anyway." And so began something new. It started with simple scales. Lily's fingers were clumsy, impatient. She hit the wrong keys, frowned, started over. Thomas didn't guide her, he couldn't, but he sat beside her, watched her grow steadier, listened as the notes slowly took shape. She played every afternoon. The house began to hum again. One evening she asked, "Who's Emma?" He looked at her, startled. "It's written on this," she said, holding a folded piece of music. The ink had faded, but the name remained. "Emma, top right corner." "She's my daughter," he said. Lily nodded, thoughtful. "She must have been really good." "She was," he whispered. That night, after Lily went home, Thomas sat alone by the piano. He didn't open the bench. He didn't dust the keys. He just listened to the echoes still hanging in the air. Weeks passed, then months. One day, Lily brought a recording on her phone. "Listen," she said, pressing play. Claire de Lune. Not perfect, not polished, but familiar, warm, like coming home. Thomas closed his eyes. He saw Emma, small again, back straight, hands trembling slightly on the keys, and for the first time in years he cried. It was spring when the letter came, handwritten, no return address. "Dad, I'm sorry. I've wanted to write so many times, but I was ashamed. I was scared. I didn't know how to come home." Thomas read it once, then again, then folded it and placed it inside the piano bench, beside the others. She didn't say where she was, didn't say if she was coming back. But one morning the wind carried a familiar scent, lavender. And that evening, when he walked past the living room, Claire de Lune was on the stand and the E key wasn't flat anymore. He didn't ask how, he just sat down beside the piano, closed his eyes, and listened to Lily, to memory, to hope, soft and slow, like a familiar melody returning after a long, aching rest. Some things don't forget, not because they can't, but because they love too much to let go. A father, a daughter, a piano with chipped keys and a silent bench full of letters. This story isn't just about music, it's about waiting and love, and how sometimes, even when the house grows quiet, the song isn't over yet. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Tell us what or who you still hear in the silence. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Soulful Tales for more stories like this. Soft, slow, and full of heart. Until next time, keep listening.